right. It has happened. The button pressing has occurred. I just pushed a button, and you just pushed a button, and here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Is it your first time here? If so, welcome. Everybody else, how are you? How's it going? I hope your car drive or your breakfast or your walk or whatever it is you're doing right now, hope it's going okay. I am coming to you this week from Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I just want to give a little shout out to Colleen and her crew from Downtown Desert Yoga. I just had my first day of the Gentle is the New Advanced Easing the Pain Tour 2020 intensive here in Las Cruces, and it just went so wonderfully. And it's been so reaffirming to me because I've long held this theory that the forefront of yoga is not necessarily happening in the big cities like it used to. That in fact, it's in these little off-the-beaten places, these small, intimate little pockets of community where people are having the same kind of conversations that I'm having on the show. And that's why I think they're listening to it, and that's why they hooked up with me, and that's why I'm here. But there's a network. There's like a underground network of people out there, and you're probably one of them, whoever you are. And I want to express some solidarity, you know? It's very wonderful to know that there are really great people everywhere. And there's really, I'm going to say it, authentic yoga inquiry happening. And it's in many ways very exciting. So I'm happy to report that to you. If you're out there and you're trying to go against the grain some, you're holding a line of integrity in what you're doing, even though maybe that's not what's selling the most, or playing to people's ideas of fitness and all that stuff, that you're really trying to understand yoga for yourself and how it might serve people around you and the world. I just want you to know you are not alone. You are most certainly not alone. You might feel like you're the only one in your town, but you're definitely not alone. And it's good to know that. Hang in there. Gosh darn it. Also, if you have the chance, I highly recommend going to spend a little time in the desert. Because I've just spent not that long, like a day and a half here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And it's the desert. And it has had such a wonderful effect on my nervous system. It's incredible how being in a different environment, in a different just like geographic location with the different aspects of wherever you are, totally affects how you feel. And I just could not have needed the feeling of the desert more. It's spacious, it's been warm, and it just felt like my mind spread out. And I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the majesty of nature. And I'm suggesting that if you have lost sight of that, you find a way to touch base with it again, because we live on a truly spectacular phenomena, this planet, and it really is a marvel. And that's very much what today's talk is about with Greg Peterson. Greg started something called the Urban Farm, which is both a place and a podcast. And his whole thing is knowing where your food comes from and growing your own food. And I've tried that some. I've tried to grow some of my own food, and I've certainly been conscious to some degree about my food intake and where it comes from, but more and more, I've been thinking it's an important thing for us to consider. And it's Greg's trip, and I had a wonderful time getting to know him some and picking his brain. I'm excited for you to hear that today. Before we listen to Greg, though, I want to say something to all of you out there who are running yoga centers and using Mind Body Online. Yes, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that maybe it's time to get out from underneath that boot and switch to today's sponsor, Karmasoft. I just think that if you're an independently owned place, you're not trying to do all of your social media posts and everything through your management software system. You just need something to be able to register people for classes and to do the payroll, and you need to just not have all the bells and whistles and just give you what you need and not a bunch of stuff you don't need. Well, Karmasoft is your answer. Karmasoft is the studio management software that I used when I had my yoga center. Rudy Senecal, the owner, has been on the show. You can go back and listen to it. You can hear all about the company. I really think that it's a better option. And I know it's scary to switch, but they're going to make it easy for you, I promise. So check out Karmasoft. Go to karmasoftonline.com. Also, I do have some upcoming dates on the Easing the Pain Tour 2020. Next, I'm going to be in Sarasota, Florida, March 21st and 22nd. Then I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, April 11th and 12th. You can register for those dates and find out about more. You can also just learn all about the tour at jbrownyoga.com/tour. That's jbrownyoga.com/tour. Okay, what else? Anything else? Yeah, actually, there's one more thing. And I might very well be getting myself into trouble here, but I just can't help myself. I normally try not to say anything about politics. And if you're one of those people who email me and are always saying, I don't listen to hear politics, I come for yoga stuff. Well, listen, you might just want to start hitting that fast forward button right here, right now, because if you recall, those of you who've been around, the last time I did say something about politics, it had to do with the Democratic primary elections and how I felt that there was obviously an effort to sabotage Bernie Sanders once again, and I didn't trust some of the other candidates. I don't know if you remember all that, but I just have to say that shit in Iowa was unbelievable. I mean, really? If you think that there was anything honest about that whole thing, I don't know what to say. You know, this is my little soapbox here, and I just think that if you are someone who believes that we need to honor this planet, and you believe that we need to do something about the massive wealth inequality, which is really what it all boils down to. It's like who's paying for the politicians and getting the legislation that serves their interests. We subsidize so much with our tax dollars. We subsidize oil. We subsidize corn. We subsidize so much shit that is destroying the planet and destroying us. There's just absolutely no reason why we couldn't decide to subsidize the things that actually help people. Not really wealthy people become more wealthy, but people live decent lives with dignity and honor. And maybe that's idealistic, I don't know, but if Bernie doesn't become our president, I think we're fucked. I'm sorry, I think we're fucked. I genuinely think we're fucked. And that's scary. I feel scared in a way that I haven't felt scared in my adult life before. I don't think what's been happening is really like, okay, I think we're all in some kind of denial that we're not moving towards some authoritarianism when we clearly are. And if we don't, as the citizenry, try to exercise whatever I don't even know if we have any sway if the elections are real. I don't know. I need somebody to talk me down. I have no confidence in Buttigieg, Warren, fucking Bloomberg. Are you kidding me? Bernie is the only one who's for real. He's the only one. So look, I'm saying it, and you could be mad if you want. I don't care. I just vote for Bernie, or we deserve what we get, you know? All right, that's it. That's what I needed to say. So take it for what you will and send me your worst. In all seriousness, this really does feel like an all-hands-on-deck situation. So even if you don't agree with me, we got to do whatever we can. We got to try. We got to try, right? So get out there, do something, be active, fucking vote, and let's pray. All right, that's it. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's go ahead and get our hands in the dirt and listen to this conversation that I had with Greg Peterson.
All right.
Hello?
Really? Can I hear you now?
I don't know. Can you?
I can. There we go.
Ah, that was the ticket.
Yeah, 20 years of Apple computer tech support comes in handy occasionally. Anyways, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's fun. You know, I have to be honest with you. You're sort of what I would call like a wild card episode for me.
Yeah.
Because I have sort of like a process by which I normally come about having new guests. I don't know what your process is, but in this case, I departed from it just to see what happens.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it would be fun because, one, I thought it would be cool because you have a podcast too, and I was sort of looking at what you did, and it seemed interesting to me that in your world of urban farming, you have a similar, I don't know, platform, like independent platform of sorts.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm intrigued by that because I fell into that with this show some. And I thought we could kind of commune a little bit on that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always looking for other people that are doing successful podcasts and, how are you making money and what systems you're using. So I'm always open to talk about that.
Well, it's funny because I kind of geek out on some of the podcast industry stuff and like listen to some of the shows. And my producer is annoyed. He hates all that stuff. He doesn't think I should listen to it and sometimes I think they aren't right. But I do geek out on it. And one of the things that everybody agrees on, even my producer, is that like going on other people's podcasts is a great idea. Just because we have these independent little platforms and to kind of share them with each other is just smart to help independent people out.
Amen. Absolutely. Well, and right now we're getting somewhere around 50,000 listens a month. And so, it's a go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, but I was looking back and it seemed like it started for you in 2015. Is that right?
Yep.
That's around when I started mine too. Maybe just after you started yours, I started mine.
And then I followed, John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire.
Oh, I've heard of him, but I don't really know much about him.
Yeah, he started a online school called Podcasters Paradise in 2012. And so basically what I did is I bought the school. I hired an intern from Arizona State University to help me set it up. And we followed it. Basically, we did exactly what he told us to do. And, then it's working. It would be nice to figure out how to make some more money on the podcast. But
I think that's a quandary everybody who's been doing it for a few years is at, because I know about you, we've tried ad stuff and, sometimes like we have a couple sponsors now that really work. Like the relationship is good and it makes sense.
I heard the one on anatomy, and that's from my experience of yoga teacher training. Anatomy is one of the big pieces that needs to be filled.
Well, but it's interesting again, like, just in terms of doing it, it's not ideal. And we did set up a subscription now, a premium subscription where we have an archive that we've walled off some.
Right.
But
how's that working?
Good. I mean, the first, like the last 52 episodes, like the last year is always free. So if people have been around since the beginning, nothing's changing for them, you know?
Right.
But it has developed into like a real, as you know, you develop like an archive of stuff, and it's like it's like an education, those conversations, you know? It's a real service. So it's kind of a trade-off, because I didn't want to do like a straight Patreon thing and to like do it that way always felt not right, didn't sit well. So it is a little bit of like support the show and also have access. And we came up with a choose your commitment. So you can choose 5, 10, 15, or there's an annual, or we also wrote, if you can't afford it, let us know and we'll give you a free account. Like you know what I mean? We tried to make it like, hey, support the show. But it's a weird thing because people aren't used to paying for podcasts. Like they're like one of those things in your mind that are free.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation. Mom was in marketing for decades. She was one of the top salespeople at a local business furniture warehouse. She was making $250,000 a year doing it. And she asked me the other day, she said, Greg, do you spend any money on advertising for what you do? And I said, no, not really. And she said, well, that could be what the podcast is. Because we have the online school, and I do a local fruit tree program in Phoenix. So she reframed it for me.
Right.
Real nicely.
Well, we've been thinking of it essentially as like my social media. Like I got off of social media, and so the podcast and essentially my email list, those are my social media channels, and they work better than the social media channels do. Right.
Well, one interesting piece of data that I want to share with you. You're inside Libsyn.
I am, yeah.
Yeah. And is that how you wall off the other episodes inside using the Libsyn?
No, because they take 50%.
Right.
So we didn't use their app. Like we built our own web app essentially.
Oh, got it. So we're inside Libsyn, and last on the 12th, I guess that was last Thursday, we had 3,922 people listen to our podcasts. And when I drill into that, we've put out a little over 500 episodes. And when I drill into that, on that day, on that Thursday, 532 episodes got listened to. So they're listening back all the way back to the very beginning. And it's like a little bit mind blowing that, the first podcast on that day, my very first podcast from 2015, got listened to like 17 times last Thursday.
I know, it's weird because also in your mind everything's progressed on, and sometimes you'll get an email from somebody about an episode that happened years ago, and you're like, you got to listen to the later episode where I talked about that and I changed my mind or whatever.
Yeah, you know? Exactly.
Anyways, I guess the thing that I was curious about, you mentioned that you bought this company, so it seemed like you had like a former life before you were an urban farmer, and you mentioned that you were in computers. So why did you go from computers to farming?
So are we actually recording? Is this part of the gig?
Yeah, we're good. We're going.
All right, cool. Fantastic. So actually,
I hope that's okay. I always just go from the get-go. I hope that's all right. I didn't mean to throw you like a curveball or anything like that.
No, it's good. It's good.
All right, cool.
It's actually not quite that way. So I'm 58 years old, and when I was 14, for whatever reason, I wrote a paper on how we were overfishing the oceans. So I knew back in 1974 that there was something inherently wrong with the way we were living on the planet and eating on the planet. So in my mid-teens, I knew there was something wrong. And at the age of 15, I started my first business here in Phoenix. I used to clean, service, and build fish ponds for people. In fact, my first job or two, Mom had to take me in her Pinto to do the job. So at 15, I was charging people money to clean their fish ponds for them. And around that same time, I was very interested in aquaculture, fish farming. And so I was converting people's backyard swimming pools into aquaculture ponds where they were actually raising food for their family. And so I did that for about 7 or 8 years. Around that same time, I also owned 11 gift wrap centers in the malls at Christmas time. So from about the time I was 18 or 19 to the time I was 24, a buddy of mine and I started these gift wrap centers in the malls. So I did that until 1984 when I let my parents convince me to get a, in quotes, real job. So I had a real job for 11 months of 1984. I ended up getting fired, and I was miserable. And at the time, a friend of mine who I was rooming with had a Macintosh 128, one of the very first Macintosh computers. Mm-hmm. And I was delivering pizzas in 1984, at the end of 84 and into 85. I was delivering pizzas at night, and he was working, we worked opposite shifts. He did something else. Can't remember what. And so I had his computer, Macintosh computer, to sit and play on all day. Mm-hmm. So by the time 1985 ended, I had bought my own Macintosh computer, and I bought one of the very first laser printers.
I had an Apple IIe.
Oh, there you go. That was free.
I was probably around 15 at that time, 14, 15, and I went to computer camp, and we learned BASIC.
Yep.
Was that first start. And there was actually like quite a bit of like, I remember being on like a BBS, like a bulletin board system. Right. And we would do phone freaking where someone actually gave me these numbers I could use to call these international, like I was doing, and I had a phone coupler. I had all kinds of crazy, like it was that War Games, right? That movie War Games came out.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So but how does it that you start that wrapping business at age 18? How do you come up with the idea that you just entrepreneurial minded at that age? Because when I was 18, I wasn't thinking about stuff smart like that.
Well, back then there were these commercials, the Ronco commercials that played late at night. And I was always curious. I had a paper route when I was 12, and, I was always curious about how people made money. And, I just do ideas. When they come up, I just jump in and do them. And I've had 30 businesses over the course of my life, and some of them lasted, I say, a sneeze. They last for no time at all. And some of them, I have 2 of them that have been in business for 20 years each. So I just jump in. It's where I'm most comfortable.
I see. Well, give me the rough out of how they went with the businesses. What happened? What were the first businesses, and what were the ones that led up until the one that you're doing now?
Ah, very good. So I had my fish pond business and the canning, the gift wrap business until 1984. And then I jumped into computers and technology. I bought a laser printer, as I mentioned, and in 84 through about 87, I did newsletters and stuff like that for people. Around that same time, the Apple Authorized Training Center was available here in Phoenix, and I was already teaching people how to use Macintosh computers. So for about 10 years, I did that. About the same time, in the mid-'80s, I also developed a piece of software that was, you'd call them a plug-in now, but back then they weren't that. And that I actually did for 20 years until 2004. When I graduated from college, I went back to college late in life. I'm a lifelong learner, and I went back to college late in life and graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2004 and my master's degree in 2006, basically in urban and environmental planning. And as part of my undergraduate work, I had to write a mission and vision for my life. Now, the house that I live in, I've been in 30 years, and I purposefully bought it to grow food. So I've been in here since 1989, and so I've always had this hobby of growing food. Well, in 2002, when I wrote my mission and vision, I created this vision for this property. So my house sits right in the middle of Phoenix. It's 1/3 of an acre. That's basically 80 feet wide and 160 feet deep. So it's a standard size lot for Phoenix. And and what I created in my vision was I call it an environmental showcase home. Basically, my home, called the Urban Farm, is primarily edible, or it supports edibles. I teach and share about permaculture, and I learned permaculture here on the property. Permaculture I like to call the art and science of working with nature. I have 70 fruit trees on the property. We do rainwater and gray water harvesting. I have chickens in the backyard. I have solar panels on the roof. Basically, I live as green of a lifestyle as possible here at the Urban Farm. And then I call it a showcase home. So 4 times a year on weekends, 4 weekends a year, I open it up and I actually bring tours of people through here. And I started doing tours of the place in 2003. And back then, there were Saturdays when I would set up my tent and wait for people and nobody would show up. Now, I have to offer 4 tours on a weekend because we'll get between 150 and 200 people show up to see what an urban farm looks like. And so for somebody walking up my driveway, it would look like every other house on the street, except there's lots of things growing. And when you dig in deeper, you'll find that you can eat most everything that's here. And I don't do production farming. I do forest. I call it forest farming, where I'm actually growing. At any given moment, there's a salad in my yard. There's 20, 30, 40, 50 different things I can go harvest that are edible. And basically what I've done over the past 25, 30 years here is I've created natural systems that perpetuate themselves. So I plant open pollinated carrot seeds. They go to seed. I spread the carrot seeds when they go to seeds, and next year carrots come up. I didn't have to plant them again. So I've looked at natural systems in nature, and I've just kind of flowed those natural systems, or flowed into them here, so that the property just kind of manages itself food-wise. That's how I got to here.
Wow. Well, I mean, I have to say, I do not have much experience at all in this area. I've said, if you listen to that episode with Neil, that I grew up in the suburbs and I moved to the big city.
Yep.
But when we were in Brooklyn, which is where I was before now, I'm in Pennsylvania now, but I was in Brooklyn for most of my adult life. And for the last 7 years I was there, we had this backyard, and my wife made some beds and grew like tomatoes and a few things. And we definitely had like a couple years where we didn't have to buy any tomatoes.
Nice.
And I became kind of intrigued, but it felt like a lot of work, actually, though. Like, it didn't feel that easy. Like, it felt like it took quite a bit of effort to make it happen, to do it. But I think that's because we didn't know we were on a learning curve about how to do it smart.
Exactly. And I tell people this all the time. You don't want to, when you first get started, you don't want to take on too much. You just want to take on a little bit, be successful at that, and then take on a little bit more, because it can be a lot. You can get overwhelmed. The good news is that after a few years, once you put systems in place, it kind of automatically manages itself.
Yeah, I think that's right. If you get a good system that, like you described, kind of is self-perpetuating, then it cuts down on all the effort you have to put in.
Right.
Well, the other experience I have is that my mother-in-law, she grew up on a farm, and now they live in Virginia, and they have a farm there, and she knows how to grow stuff. Like, she grows like award-winning heads of broccoli or whatnot. And the food that we get from her is so markedly better than the food that we buy at the store.
Yes.
Like, there's just, it's undeniable. Like, when Nana's peaches when we got Nana's peaches, forget it,
Right.
There's no comparison. And I wonder, I remember reading this book, Diet for a New America, back when I first got into yoga, and just about like the production of food in general, and how much of it is not really in our best interests always.
Right. And there's science behind it.
Yeah, and I guess my sort of query to you is, how much of it for you is political, or how much of it is just because you feel like this is what is right for you?
Yeah. Well, so I believe that the single most important thing that anybody can be doing right now is figuring out where their food comes from and how to grow their own. Because we have a broken food system in this culture. Have you heard of the SAD diet?
No, what's that?
It's an acronym for Standard American Diet.
Oh, it is sad.
It is very sad. Most things are highly processed. And when they're highly processing things, they're putting all kinds of chemicals. Read the labels when you go into the grocery store. So that's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem that people don't really know about, and on one side of this coin, it's a beautiful system. On the other side, it is ripe for a crash. And that is that we have a just-in-time food system in our country, which basically means that groceries get delivered just in time. And mostly we want that because we want fresh food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this eloquent system of farming, shipping food from all over the world, and getting it to the grocery stores just in time, which on the positive side of this, we feed 350 million people just in the United States, approximately. That's upwards of 1 billion meals a day. So to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do something like that is pretty phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of the coin, however, is that we have a 3-day supply of food. And they did some academic studies on this, so this is proven data. We have a 3-day supply of food in any urban area. And I say we actually have a 3-hour supply, because if there's a storm coming, or if there's a trucker's outage, or any of these things, you know what happens. The grocery
Everybody rushes the stores, yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a 3-day supply of food. Now, most of it is sad food, which isn't very good for us anyways. But those are the two reasons, and call them political if you want. Those are the two reasons that I do what I do, is because I believe that the most important thing that we can be doing right now is educating ourselves about where our food comes from and how to grow our own. Because when you take a bite of Nana's peach, can you ever eat a store-bought peach again?
I mean, here's the thing. We don't always have we don't have enough food from that source.
Right.
And we do our best to buy organic, and it's not as good, but we probably wouldn't buy peaches. That's the thing. We wouldn't get everything from the store. There's things we get from the store and things we don't get from the store, but still, I think it's hard to know. It is a challenge to do what you're saying. Like, it takes, you gotta put some effort and attention to it. I agree that it's important.
Yes.
And it's in line with like a lot of other things we've talked about on this show. Even from like an Ayurvedic perspective, we've talked about like what inputs what you're putting into your system, whether it's a food or a thought or whatever. Mm-hmm. And to be clear about that. And when it comes to food, you do have to kind of drill down sometimes and to find out, to know, because I don't really know. I don't know where the food comes from that I buy at the grocery store, really.
Right.
You don't really know, but I know when I get it from Nana where it's coming from.
Yeah. Well, and farmers markets here in Phoenix have exploded over the past 15 years.
Yeah, we've got one of the biggest here in Easton, Pennsylvania, where I live now. Yeah.
Exactly. So it doesn't have to be hard. You just start a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And before long, you can be growing a little bit of your own food, or plant a peach tree and grow your own peaches. Because here's the deal. From a health perspective, if somebody harvests a peach and ships it from Peru, that's where they're coming from this time of year, they harvest it when it's not ripe. There is something that happens in the tree, and this goes for pretty much everything you're harvesting, where you're harvesting it not ripe and then shipping it. There's something called a lectin. One of my permaculture teacher calls it an anti-nutrient. Mm-hmm. And lectins impact your health negatively. And when you harvest something that is not ripe, the lectin count is much higher. As a peach or a tomato or an eggplant ripens on the plant, the lectins drop and the nutritional value increases. So when we're harvesting things early and then shipping them, they have more lectins in them. Their nutrient density isn't as high as it would be if it was freshly picked. Plus, the moment you harvest it, the nutrient density starts dropping. So this is one of the big problems with our pick and ship system, is that the food nutritional value isn't nearly as good. That's why when you pick one of Nana's peaches and it the flavor explodes in your mouth, it's more nutrient dense. There's more nutrients in it, and therefore it tastes better. So when we're growing our own food and harvesting it when it's ripe, it's better for us. Mm-hmm. And when you eat, I want to take you on a trip here real quick.
Okay.
Go out to Nana's orchard with your kids in your mind and pick one of those peaches. I'm doing it with you right now. Pick one of those peaches and take a bite out of it. Mm-hmm. Can you feel it? I can feel the tingle, man.
I know. They got massive berry bushes too. You get the berries every day. Yeah. It's amazing. And that's my one tie into what you're talking about, because I didn't have that in my childhood, but we have that with my now for my kids, and it is a special experience.
It is.
And it is a different experience of food than I had when I was growing up. We were doing, frozen dinners in the microwave and shit.
Right. Yeah. So was I in the 70s and early 80s.
Wow. Well, how soon into it for you did it become, it seems like you said you always had kind of like visions of things, of ideas. Was the idea to just grow your own food, or was it to educate people like you are? Like, was that always part of it for you, or did that come about?
It was, so me growing food, me gardening, me farming is a hobby. Yeah. My passion is to light people up around where their food comes from and get them to figure out how to grow their own food. So I have an interesting trajectory in my life. In 1974, I wrote a paper on how we were overfishing the oceans. In 1981, I was 21 years old in 1981. And I was on the board of the Arizona Aquaculture Association. And we went around and visited some of the fish farms around the state. Yes, this is the desert, but we do have fish farms here. And one of the fish farms that we visited was harvesting their fish. Now, when you harvest a fish, you get about 30% meat and 70% of everything that was left over. They took that leftover and they threw it out. They basically threw it away to the animals. So that causes an animal.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.